All right, so in the previous session, we were looking at, just for the continuity's sake, we were on problem definition, developing an approach to problem, formulating a research design. And then we looked at secondary and secondary data analysis, qualitative research, survey and observation research, experimental research, measurement and scaling, questionnaire and form design. And now we look at sampling process and sampling size. So this class, we're going to be looking at sampling process and sampling size. Right, so we were on this particular concept, we were defining population, we were defining what a sample is. So when you conduct a market research, there is going to be a population. You're going to be conducting study to unearth information or data about a population, right? Now, I was giving an example that if you want to know something about let's say all the characteristics of all the students of a university of around 6,000 students, sometimes it's impossible to reach out to all 6,000 of them and get a response. So we might actually choose to pick up 200 students from them, talk to them, and whatever is their response, we would take that to be representative of the opinion of the entire university, right? So this process is called the whole process of sampling. I mean, picking up these 200 students. Of course, these 200 students should also be representing the university. When I say in the university, if there are undergrad students, postgraduate students, doctoral students, and postdoctoral students, so all these segments should also be coming in this 200. Right, and then if we are able to talk this 200 and get a sense of their opinion on something, or if you are able to measure their average intelligence or average height, weight, or whatever, so you can safely assume that whatever you gathered from this sample of 200 students should also be largely applicable for the other students of the university, right? This whole process is the sampling process. You have a sample and you have a population, and that, yeah. Now, I also explained to you what is okay, anybody any doubts about what sample? And because I did covered all these things, we discussed about all these things, which is one reason I'm going a little fast, making sure I'm able to catch up. Then we also have the concept of census. So census is nothing when you actually reach every member of the population. Suppose you are actually able to take the feedback of all 6,000 students of the university, then you would be undertaking a census, right? If you're getting a response from every member of the population. Whereas if you're only talking to the sample, of course you get a sense of the representation of this, but yeah, you wouldn't call it a census. Now, again, to another interesting and important definition, one is what is called as parameter, the other is called as what is statistic. A parameter is any value which you determine for the population. Like if you're determining the mean, average, standard deviation, median, or any of these for the population, you call it a parameter. Even the sample size, that value of the population n, and we denote actually capital N. Capital N is 6,000 for a population, and you use small n for the sample. Small n is going to be 200 for the sample. So capital N is 6,000, small n is 200. So so anything which is calculated, any measure, let's just say mean, median, mode, standard deviation, range, whatever it is that you're doing for the population is referred to as a parameter. Whatever you determine for the sample is called the statistic. Okay. So this is where we were in the last class. Okay. So now, when should you conduct a sample study and when should you undertake a census study, right? So conditions favoring the use of a sample and using the favor of a census. For sample, you would, of course, I mean, see, the biggest criteria and concern is actually the time and the cost. So if you have to reach every single element of the population, it is time consuming and it's costly, right? So as much as possible, you will be going with the sample, right? Because reaching the population, reaching all the elements, perhaps it's not worth it also. I mean, if you have, let's say, 2 crore people in the city, it is actually not possible to reach all this 2 crore, maybe by talking to 10,000 or 500 people in the city, you will be able to get a sense of what it is that the city wants to do, or whatever it is that your study is. So of course, the greater the sample size, the more representative it will be of the population, and therefore the inferences that you draw from the study will have more credence if the sample size is large enough. If it is smaller, it will have to that extent limitations. But having said that, these are the reasons why that favor the condition of favor the use of sample. Say if the budget is small, I said cost constraint, time is short, then of course go for sample. If the population size is large, because it will be unviable to reach all these elements of the population. If the variance in the characteristic is small, then you are comfortable just doing the sample because you know that there isn't much variance. So from the sample itself, you should be able to get a good estimate or sense of what is the characteristic of the population as well. And then another important criteria is nature of measurement, destructive. So any guesses what is a destructive sampling? Are you guys clear? I mean, I'm assuming that you understand what sample. Yeah.
Yeah, sampling is understood. So if you could give a hint.
You still not understood sample.
Like destructive in the not able to figure out.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah. Any guess? Yesi? What could be a destructive sampling?
No, sir.
Rahul?
No, sir, no idea.
Shamika? Shamika, why is your camera off?
So actually my network is very poor. That is why my camera is off. And so destructive sampling, according to me, means maybe you remove a particular, a sector, a person or something from your sample size, and therefore you sort of destroy your sample, maybe.
Antra?
Sir, I have no idea.
Okay. Suppose you are a brick manufacturer. Okay, you manufacture bricks. And you have, let's say, a consignment of, or you're buying bricks. Okay, you're buying bricks, for instance. You have a consignment of some 20,000 bricks which has come for your home construction. And you want to check the strength of these bricks. How would you actually check the strength of the bricks? Basically, it is done in a laboratory, as in a soil mechanics laboratory, right? So you take the brick and you apply pressure. Okay, you apply pressure and you measure it, and you apply pressure till it breaks. So you determine what its breaking point is. Right. So basically, out of this 20,000, you might take around 10 bricks and check randomly what is its strength. But if you take this 10 bricks and destroy, I mean, you check its breaking point. After that, you cannot use the brick. Right. So randomly you pick up 10 bricks from the pile, and then if you are convinced, okay, the strength is this much, then you have reasons to believe that this is the strength of the remaining. Did you get it? So how would you determine what is the strength, breaking strength, or how much it can hold of bricks? Right. So to understand it, you have to break it, and you have to apply pressure till it breaks. And then you know, okay, at this point it breaks, and therefore it can withstand or withhold this much pressure or this much weight. So it is called a destructive method of testing its strength. But think about it, there is no other way. The only way you can test is just that. But this is again sampling, right? You're taking a sample out of 20,000 bricks, you're taking some 15 or 20, randomly picking it up, and then sort of exerting pressure on it and trying to see what is its breaking strength. And based on that, whatever it is, 500 Newton, 300 Newton, 250 Newton, whatever breaking strength is. Get a sense of it? So when you have destructive processes, then you cannot, to determine the strength of all 20,000, you can't break all 20,000 bricks. Okay, so that is the whole concept of what destructive sampling is. And then attention to individual cases. If it's a sample, you will of course be able to give attention to individual cases and make an informed decision. Similarly, census is all of that. What are the conditions which favor the use of census? So if the budget is large, if you have a lot of money to do the survey, yes, time available is long. If you have whatever 6 months to 1 year period or whatever 3 months period or whatever, if the population size is small, maybe you can do a census. You can actually reach out to every element on the in the population. If the variance in the characteristics, if it's large variations among all the constituent elements, maybe then it makes sense to go ahead and do a census. And if the nature of measurement is non-destructive, so now suppose you are doing an interview method, then of course you don't have to do anything destructive. You're just talking to the person, So yeah. And attention to individual cases, no, because when you have a large number of people, if you go to you cannot actually give personal attention to individual cases. Now this is the sampling design process. You have to define accurately who the target population is. You have to determine the sampling frame, select a sampling technique, determine the sample size, executing sampling process. We will be looking at each of these one by one in the next few minutes. Okay. And defining the target population. So target population, basically, like I said, if it's the university example that I gave the other day, like you have to study all the students in the university, and if you want to understand what is their awareness about something, or if they want to understand what is their average IQ, or if you want to conduct some test or something of that sort, you take up population, right? So population, so the population, sorry, you'll take out a sample. The population is all the students, 6,000 students of the university, and your sample will be 150 or 200 students, right? Extent, of course, extent. Okay, extent is because of marketing research. Sometimes you have to define, whether you are doing it within the city of Hyderabad, whether you're sitting in this doing in the city of Bangalore, whether you're doing it in the country of Sri Lanka, whether you're undertaking it in the Asian continent or whatever. Sometimes, for marketing research, it's helpful. There are multinational companies who do research. So maybe the characteristics or the findings they find in Asia may be different from what they find in Europe. It may be different from what they find in Africa. So they may want to do a market research for a particular continent or a particular region or a particular city. So therefore, defining that geographical limit is important. Who exactly is your target population? So if you say the target population is Asian women, so then you will have to, make sure that you exclude from your data set all the people in Africa and Australia and Europe and all of that, and then you will only be looking at people of Asia. Again, time frame is important. Let us say, when are you going to undertake the study? So we are going to undertake next winter or in the next 6 months. So I'm interested in knowing what is the response in the next 2 months, or the time frame is also important. So when you define the target population, one has to be specific. When is the market research going to be undertaken? Who is the target population? The time duration and the extent, the geographical boundaries, right? So let's look at it, a graphical representation of it, defining the target population. So let's say here they've said time frame is upcoming summer, extent domestic United States, element females over 18 years of age, and the sampling unit households with females over 18 years of age. Right. So basically, you should be very clear about who your target population, who are you going to be interviewing, or who are you going to be interacting with, or who are you going to get a response from. Now, sampling frame error occurs. Let's say, for instance, you want to study, you want to understand what is the average awareness level of undergrad students in a university, and you approach the dean, and the dean instructs his office staff to give you a list of undergrad students. So by mistake, he gives you a mix of undergrad plus postgraduate students of particular course, which has got 200 list of students, right? So now what has happened is you are interested in studying undergrad students. However, the list which has come to you also has got some postgraduate students, right? And therefore, an error occurs because your focus of study is undergrad students, but your sampling actually, without your knowing, you are actually going to be interviewing or interacting or handing out questionnaire to some of these postgraduate students also, right? So therefore, error occurs in your sample itself. Now, if you make a study based on postgraduate students, perhaps the postgraduate students are better aware about a crisis that or whatever that you're going to raise, whatever topics you're going to be discussing, right? So therefore, a sampling error can take place if the sampling frame list applied by a commercial vendor is different from what you are actually planning to study, right? So there is an overlap here, but if some of it is from outside, then of course your conclusion will also be to that extent vary, or it will not be accurate. Classification of sampling techniques. So now there are different ways. Now we have come to this. There are 6,000 students in the university. Now you have to pick up this 200. Now there are different ways you can pick up this 200. Now the process of sampling is how do you identify this 200, right? So again, if you want to study something in the city of Bombay, there are around 2 crore people in Bombay. Now, if you want to study, let's say you make some observations, so you need a sample of 10,000. How are you going to pick this 10,000? So that is what is covered under this particular topic. How do you conduct a sample, or how do you identify sampling? You call it sampling techniques. So there are 2 ways in which you can do it. One is called the probability sampling, and the other one is called non-probability sampling. Okay, so the basic difference between these two is probability sampling is actually a very scientific way of sort of sampling, and it is based on the principles of probability. And whereas non-probability sampling is more based on your judgment and your convenience, right? So okay, now let's say, for instance, okay, yeah, I'll explain in detail as I sort of go much more detail in the next few slides. So basically, probability sampling is more scientific, and you sort of include the concepts of probability, whereas in non-probability sampling, you sort of act as per your convenience, or it is not rigid in terms of the procedure followed is not very rigid. Okay, so determining the size of sample size actually. So there is actually a very precise formula which is used in determining sample size, right? So this particular it's used in mathematics. I mean, because it's taught in advanced statistics with the error rate required, value of confidence, and all of that. But okay, let me not get into that. I will just give you a ballpark figure of what are acceptable sample sizes when you conduct a large survey. So the rule of thumb is the larger the sample size, better it is. But the moment you enlarge your sample size, there is a cost consideration. Your cost also goes up, right? So therefore, you need to find that sweet spot, that balance. So if your sample size is too small, the observations or findings that you're going to come up with might actually not be accurate, right? So but if you have to go for a large sample, again, the cost consideration is very high, time consideration is very high. So one should always be looking at what is a minimum acceptable sample size, so that you can say that your findings are valid, and it will sort of that your study would be valid and would be acceptable, and findings would be endorsed. Now, right, qualitative factors, the importance of the decision. Of course, if it's an important decision, then you need to make sure that you have a very strong case, and therefore go for a really large sample. Nature of the research, whether it's a causal research, whether it's a descriptive research, whatever. Again, all those things, these things will vary. But I'm going to just take you quickly through rough indicators of what are acceptable, sort of sample sizes. Now, for problem identification research, so minimum sample size recommended is around 500. Typical range is 1,000 to 2,500. Problem solving research, example given as pricing, minimum size of 200, and then typically 300 to 500. Product tests 200. Test marketing studies 200. TV, radio, print advertising around 150. Test market audits 10 stores. Focus groups 2 group. At minimum of 2 groups, right? So typical range is also given. Yeah, so this is for actually, yeah, commercial market research studies people undertake, so that their findings can actually be validated and they can come to conclusive decisions, and so on and so forth, right? So this is the commercial number of respondents they're required to reach, so that they can publish papers and sort of be sure that these are peer reviewed and validated. Now, okay, I was talking briefly about probability and non-probability sampling techniques. So now let's first look at non-probability sampling. So there are 4 kinds of non-probability sampling techniques. So first of those, it's called convenient. Second is judgmental. Third is quota. Fourth is snowball. Anybody familiar with any of these terms? Are you familiar? Have you heard about techniques like this earlier? Probability, non-probability? No?
No, sir.
No. Rahul?
No, sir.
Yeah, Yasi? No. Okay. Shamika?
Sir.
No, Antara?
No, sir.
Okay, nobody's heard about this. It's fine. Okay. So non-probability sampling techniques. Okay, convenient sampling is simply this. You want to conduct a survey and you will simply go out and okay, let me just initially, before I talk about non-probability, let me talk about what a probability sample is. Now, in a university, there are 6,000 students. Okay, and if I need to pick up 200 students from this, and if I need to ensure that each of each of the 6,000 students has an equal probability of getting picked up, right? There are 6,000 students. I need to pick 200 students. Out of this 6,000, I need 200. Okay. So how do you think one could do it? I'm just asking, like say for instance, how would you do it? Let's say if you were to pick 200 students from 6,000 students, how would you do it? Anything, a wrong answer is also acceptable. I mean, whatever comes to your mind. If suppose you had to get a response from 6,000 students, suppose you want to measure the height, or conduct a small quiz and see what is their awareness on something. So you need to reach 200 in a university. How would you approach it? Anything that comes to your mind.
We need to reach 200 students.
Right. Or you need to get a response from 200 students. You need to get response to a questionnaire from 200 students. How would you do it?
So one way is if it's a questionnaire, we can just send a mass email. That's one method.
Okay, but are you reaching 200 students in doing so? So you are sending to all 6,000, right?
Yeah, but out of the 6,000 students, may not all of them will respond. That's for sure. But I guess we can reach 200.
Okay.
Or then, yeah, other methods are I think so. Like
Okay, let me give you another example, because 6,000 looks like an overwhelming number. Let's say there are 60 students in a class or 50 students in a class. Okay, 50 students in a class, and I need to pick some 10 students. Now my population is 50 and my sample is 10. Is it relatable? Right? I'm saying my population, I want to conduct a study on 50 students, a particular section, a particular class. And now my population is 50, and out of that I need to pick 10 students. So 10 is a sample here. 50 is the population, 10 is a sample. Now how do I identify this 10?
we can reach them personally, I guess.
Yeah. How do you pick? I mean, I need to pick, no, say out of 50 students, how do I choose these 10 students?
Based on what, sir, we need to pick, like based on their heights. Like did you mention earlier? You mentioned, like, for example, like
No, I need to get a sense of what is the average height. Okay.
average height. Okay.
I need to get an average height. So instead of because there are 50 students, I can't measure all 50. So I need to pick up 50 and pick up 10 and measure their heights. And then they say, okay, because the average height of 10 students is 1.65 centimeters, it's very likely that of the whole class is also 1.65 centimeters, something like that.
I'm not able to think as of anything, but the thing that you have to do is, like, you have to reach the smallest means, I guess, the person who has the least height, and also the person who has the greatest height, that should be there in the sample, I guess.
Okay. Other inputs? Yes, Shamika?
So what we can basically do is maybe randomly select 10 people from the class, because it's just 60, so we can just either based on just the roll number for example, that students from roll number 1 to 10 can come ahead, and we select them and make them respond. And if suppose it's in a class and one person is absent, then we can randomly select roll number 52 to come and give his or her input for the questionnaire. Or if today we have WhatsApp, so we can send it on WhatsApp to the group of 60 people, and we can have 10 people respond to it. So we can keep 10 people as the maximum responses that the form can get.
Okay, great. Antara?
Yes, so we can like randomly pick people for responding.
I love this word randomly. So what do you mean by randomly? That is the essence of this. The whole the convenience, the sampling. Randomly is a great word, but what do you mean by randomly?
So like there is no specification of picking up people for the response. Anybody can respond to that survey or something.
There is no specification. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay. Um, okay, good responses. Rahul?
Sir, we can float a form to 60 students and only allow 10, 10 responses, and then we have to close the form.
Okay, you float it to 60, and for the first 10 who respond, I accept that, and remaining. Okay, yes, Yesi?
Samir, Anta, and Samika. It should be random until 10 people, sir. Pick
Correct.
random people.
Yeah, agree. Yes, it should be random, but how do we ensure it's random? How do you think you can pick up 10?
Uh, just pick up random person.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree. I agree with both you and Antara and Shamika. All of you use the word random, which is actually, yeah, which is a very crucial and important word. But how do you ensure that I pick these 10 random people? How do you do it in practice?
I have a suggestion.
Yeah, go ahead, Prajwal.
Maybe like if everyone has like roll number, say 1 to 60,
Mm-hmm.
we can just it's very basic. I thought like in a bowl full of, I guess, numbers, we can just randomly without seeing select 10.
Absolutely, that is the correct answer. And that is the example of what is called as a simple random sampling. Okay, what you are doing, what you've ensured is that every element in the population has an equal chance of getting picked. When you put the names of all the students in a board, mix it and randomly or take out 10 names. Every element, all 60 students have an equal probability of getting picked. All 50 students, right? Correct, no?
Yes, sir.
As opposed to just calling the first two rows. Okay, first two rows come here. That is not random sampling. Right. So the idea of simple random sampling is exactly what Prajwal said. Put the names of all the people in the bowl, mix it, and pick out 10 chits or 10 bits of paper, which is their roll numbers. And then you measure their heights. And then you can confidently and reasonably say that, yeah, because the average height of these 10 people is 1.5 centimeters, very likely for the rest of the class is also 1.5 centimeters. Right. So this is a classic example of what they call a simple random sampling, wherein every element of a population has equal probability or equal chance of getting selected in the sample. Right. So now coming back to the university example with 6,000 students where we have to have 200 samples. So 200, the sample size has to be 200. So what you need to do is get the list of all 6,000 students of the university and do the same exercise. Or use a software electronically. You get a list of all the students electronically. Use create a random number generator using Excel. You can do it, and you can say select a random number between 0 and 6,000. You get one number. They'll maybe give you 75. Then pick up that 75th student. Then use another random number. Then it may give you 4,020. So take that 4,020 student, and so on and so forth. Okay, till such time you get your 200 students. So that is the classic definition of what a simple random sampling. In simple random sampling, every element of the population has an equal chance of getting picked up. Right. So So that is that. So therefore, I said when you do probability sampling, you use the concepts of probability to sort of pick up your sample. You identify your sample, who should be spoken to, and which sample should you pick up, and all of that. Whereas in non-probability sampling, because this is actually not feasible. Suppose you want to, actually not always feasible. Let's say there are 2 crore people in Bombay, so it's not possible to put everything in a jar or do whatever I just mentioned. You cannot always do it, and therefore all the time you cannot use the principles of probability and pick up, and therefore you have non-probability samples also, right? So non-probability sampling, the simplest of it is called convenience sampling, whereas you go and sort of talk to people simply because that person happened to be there at a place and time of your convenience. So you wanted to talk to 200 people, you go with your letterboard and you go with your group of friends and you go and talk to the first 200 people you come and meet. And that is called convenience sampling. You will find that in malls, when people come to you, they want to get some responses. That is again another example of convenience sampling. You're getting interviewed because you are there at that point of time, at the same time as the researcher is. He has not identified you after a probability method or anything. You just happen to be there at the time he is doing this questionnaire, sampling, market research. So therefore he talks to you. Right. So convenience sample is a non-probability sampling method wherein the respondent, or the researcher talks to whoever is available or whoever is convenient to reach at a time and place of his choosing. Okay. So that is convenience sampling. Judgmental sampling is wherein the judgment of the researcher is also used. Let's say, for instance, suppose you want to get people's responses on, let's say, green energy, or and so therefore you have this thing in your mind ki, oh, if I ask the man on the road, man on the street, he may not be aware of it. So I need to talk to someone who is a little more educated. Maybe you will go talk to a university professor, or you will go and talk to somebody who works in a certain industry. Because you know that if I ask about green energy to the average person, if you use convenience sampling, you will never find someone who knows about green energy, or the average person may not be aware of it, or something more which you think where you, but however you have it in your mind, you know that okay, where am I going to get responses to my questionnaire? I know people who would be able to answer this question, and you will go out and reach out to them and then administer your questionnaire or get a response from them. That's called judgment sampling, wherein you use your judgment and say, okay, fine. If I randomly go out on the street and ask people, 90 out of 100 wouldn't know about what I'm talking about. Right. Therefore, I'd conserve energy and I would use my good judgment and say, okay, I'm doing a study on, something which everybody the average man would be unaware of. Therefore, let me sort of, so that is called judgment sampling. Then you have what is called a quota sampling. So quota sampling, as the word denotes. So now you know that, let's say a population of Bombay has got, let's say, around 55% women and 45% men. Right. So, and now you want to talk to, let's say, 1,000 people in Bombay to sort of study something. So then you will make sure that your sample also has got 55%. So if you will actually talk to 55 women, 550 women and 450 men. You will try to sort of keep whatever ratio of whatever characteristic you think is important in the sample. Whatever is there in the population, you will try to maintain the same ratio in the population also. Right. For instance, in your study of your university students, suppose you think that university has got 70% undergrad students and 30% postgrad students. So when you pick up your sample, you will ensure that there are, that proportion is maintained. So if your sample is 200, you will make sure there are 140 undergrad students and 60 postgrad students. So that whatever is there in the original population, that ratio you maintain in your sample also. Clear? All blank faces. I'm not sure whether it's getting absorbed well or not. Yeah, Rahul?
Yes, sir.
Clear, Prajwal?
Yes, sir.
Shamika, Antara, both of you.
Sir,
Yeah.
can you
Understood, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me, Prajwal.
Sir, can you also display the PPT along with?
Yeah. 1 second. Yeah. Just yes. See, you're okay because you're Faces are not telling me anything. That is the reason I'm asking specifically. Yes, you okay? Yes, screen is frozen. Yeah, yes.
I'm okay, sir.
Yeah, okay, okay. Did you understand the concept? Okay, fine, great. Yeah. So convenient sample. Okay, I'm showing the screen once again. Convenient sampling is wherein the researcher goes out and talks to people who are convenient, as in convenient sense ki at the time and place of his choosing, whenever he goes out to conduct research, whoever he comes across, and you happen to interview that person because that person also happens to be there at that same time, right? Judgment samplers, when you know that such and such person is likely to know responses or will be able to give you inputs about whatever you're studying. So instead of going out to the mall and asking somebody, you will specifically approach, you will maybe go to a planetarium and talk to someone, assuming that he would know more about maybe green earth or green research or whatever you're doing. Or you may go to science museum, so that people there may be more aware of whatever you want to study. So you will hang around there and talk to people who come there and not go to a cinema hall. Okay, then quota sampling is basically you will ensure that if there is any sort of strata, as in any sort of classification in the population, you will ensure that that same thing is retained in your sample also. So if there are 70% men in the university and 30% women, and your sample should also have that same thing. 70% men should be there in your sample and 30% women. Similarly, undergrad students, postgrad students, whatever it is, that whatever, if some characteristics largely define the population, those characteristics should also reflect in your sample. Okay, and lastly, snowball sampling. So in snowball, what is the idea of a snow? What is a snowball? English word.
So it's a ball made of snow.
Okay, and what is the characteristic of this?
So I guess that if a snowball starts rolling on a cliff, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger in size on its own.
Exactly. It gains momentum, it gains speed, and it gains volume, and so yeah. Absolutely. Yes. So snowball basically is that you start, suppose your studies on Bitcoin, right? So basically you identify one guy who knows about Bitcoin. Again, Bitcoin is not something that the average person is aware of. So you identify the first guy, you go to him and ask him about Bitcoin and where he trades, how much is the rate, and whatever else is your questioner asking, you ask all that. Then you ask him, where can I find another guy like you? Or tell me someone that you know who's also into Bitcoin. So you get the details of the next respondent from the first respondent. And you basically ask him, tell me, do you know any of your friends who are also into Bitcoin, or other people who can I contact and speak to so that he can tell me something about Bitcoin. And from the first respondent, you get input about the second respondent. Or perhaps he'll give you 3 names. So from the first respondent, you get 3 additional names. You go to talk to each of those 3 fellows. Those 3 fellows will give you further names of maybe 10 other people or 20 other people, and then on and on and on. Because if you otherwise try to figure out anything about Bitcoin, you go out open market, it may be very difficult. So one respondent leads you to another, and same thing about maybe dog lovers or anything which is seen as niche. If you want to ask questions, so you may go to somebody with an Alsatian dog and ask him about preferences of dog food or pet food or whatever, and then you will say, tell me other people who own Alsatian dogs, and from him or her you will get the next respondent's details. You will talk to the other person and so on and so on. That's called snowballing technique, right? So all these things are non-probability sampling techniques because you don't use probability methods here. All of them, it's done on your convenience. So there is nothing scientific about it, right? So let's just look at it in detail. Convenient sampling attempts to obtain a sample of convenient elements. Often respondents are selected because they happen to be in the right place at the right time. Right? So no scientific reason why you are interviewing him. Only reason is they are there around the time that you are also there. Okay? Typically people on the street interviews. Now, an illustration of that convenient sampling. So you have 5 groups, A, B, C, D, and E. 5 groups of people, and group D happens to assemble at a convenient time and place at a place where you are. And therefore you choose the elements of group D, right? And you interview 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, simply because they happen to be at a place where you are at the time that you want to conduct a survey. So that is an illustration of convenience sampling. Is it really confusing, or is it okay? Hello?
Okay.
Okay, all right, yeah. So in case there is an issue, please do stop me. Okay, right. So judgmental sampling is a form of sampling in which population was selected based on the judgment of the researcher. So the judgment, the researcher was like, okay, I will talk to this person because he is an expert in this topic. So I would get my inputs from this particular person. So based on the judgment of the researcher, you sort of seek out respondents and conduct a study. Now here, graphical illustration of the same. So the researcher considers B, C, and E to be typical and convenient. Within each of these groups, one or two elements are selected on convenience, right? So responding, yeah.
Can you explain this grid just once more?
Okay.
Like what
This
the
is the
structure represents.
this is just a grid of people randomly A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, and the researcher believes that people in B, C, and E. Okay, people who are in B, C, and E are more likely to know about the topic that I am researching. That's my judgment call. Because I am studying Bitcoin and I feel that people in BCE, groups B, C, and E are likely to know more about it. So I reach out to groups B, C, and E, and from there I will sort of, do a convenience thing. Okay, so now I'm reaching people of B, then I will go talk to the person who is nearest to me in B or something like that. But I have done something in my mind. I have not gone and talked to any fellow, but I have used this judgment.
These are groups of people.
These are groups of people. A is one group of people, B is another group, C is another group, D. Yeah.
So in the previous grid, what did it represent?
Same thing. 5 groups: A group, B group, C group, D group, E group.
But
D
this
group happened to be at a place of my convenience at the time that I wanted to meet them. So I spoke to all the people in D. That's convenience sampling.
Okay, got it, sir.
Right, 5 groups of people: A, B, C, D. And so when I wanted to do the survey, the group D people were together at one point of time. So I went and spoke to all of them and got my research done. That's convenience.
Yeah, understood.
Right. In this one, 5 groups of people: A, B, C, D, and E. But I know because B, C, and E are more scientifically minded, and I might be getting responses from these groups, whatever I seek. So I completely ignore A and D. And I go only to B, C, and D. And from there, I choose people of my convenience or based on typicality. Okay, so that's your judgment sampling. So I've explained this, but I'm just using it, trying to sort of show the grid to you so that, that message comes out more strongly. Again, quota sample is this. If there is a composition of the population, that composition should actually be retained in your sample also. So in this case, it's a gender composition, 48 males, 52 females. So that sort of ratio should be retained within the sample also. Okay. So example, using this graphical illustration, a quota of one element from each group A to E is imposed. So the quotas, so there are 5 different groups of people: A, B, C, D, and E. The quota is at least one from each. Right. So, and therefore maybe A is arts, B is business, C is something else, C is science, D is philosophy, and E is economics. So I need to get one from each. So I go and pick one from each of those. That is quota sampling. All right. So only Prajwal is responding. Others are okay. How about Antara, Shamika?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Antara?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
great. Okay, fine. Yeah. Right. Let's move on. Snowball sampling. I did mention this again. You initially identify your respondents, and from those respondents, you identify other respondents. Okay. So snowball as then from there on, from those respondents more. So 1 to 3, 3 to 27, 27 to 100, 100 to 500 or whatever. No, it goes like that. So yeah.
Yeah, in judgmental sampling, the researcher personally thinks that if this person is good enough for my research, right?
Absolutely.
And in snowball sampling also he does the same. He reaches to the person who is of
No,
knowledge.
because in snowball sampling, I don't know where to reach this fellow. Right. Somebody may be into extreme sports, maybe into mountain climbing. So I don't know where to find the mountain climber. So I will somehow figure out the first mountain climber, and with the help of that mountain climber, I'll say, please tell me address and tell me where the other mountain climbers live in the city. So
and in judgmental sampling, like suppose it's on Bitcoin, I guess research, then I will reach to the person who is very, I guess, informed on Bitcoin.
Exactly. So there, the judgment is like, see, you know that your convenient sampling method won't work, because if you go to a mall and stand there and ask about this, very few people will know. Maybe less than 2% of the population will be able to give you anything meaningful about Bitcoin. So you know that better place to go is perhaps a museum. I'm sorry, let's say a science exhibition. Right. So you use that judgment. All right, or you will go talk to university student, or you go to, let's say, physics university, and you interact with students who study physics or commerce or business or whatever you think. It's your judgment.
Okay.
Got it. Whereas in snowball sampling, you don't know where to find the next respondent. So you will ask the first respondent where the next respondent is. So you will go to the mountain number 1, and you will ask him all about the kit and gear and everything that he purchases. And you are studying on, so your study is based on that, mountain climbing gear. Right. So then you go to the first guy, and then you get details about the second respondent from him. Right. You tell me other colleagues that you have, where else can I find? And with the input given by the first guy, you will reach out to the other respondents. And then from there, you will take further inputs, go to the next respondent. Right? Typically for things which are not widely understood, because if I go to the mall and try to get a response on mountain climbing, how many people, mountain climbers, would typically come to a mall? So you will almost perhaps draw blank. Your research would be unsuccessful. Understood? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, let's move forward. Snowball sampling is, initial group of respondents is usually selected at random. After being interviewed, these respondents are asked to identify others who belong to a target population of interest. Subsequent respondents are selected based on the reference given by people who've already been interviewed. Okay. So again, graphical illustration, elements 2 and 9 are selected randomly from A and B. Elements 2 refers to element 2 and 13, and element 9 refers to 18. So first you've randomly got this hold of respondents 2 and 9, and 2 refers to 12 and 13. Then you go to 12 and 13 and talk to him, and 9 is referred to 18. So you go to 18. Right. So it's based on referral. The first respondent leads you to second, third, and subsequent respondents. Now we come to probability sampling techniques now. So I have told you about non-probability sampling still now. There are 4 methods of non-probability sampling. First is convenience. Basically, you talk to the guy who you come across at a time and place of your convenience. Second is judgment sampling, wherein you use your judgment, you have an inkling of who will be able to give response to your questions. Right? So you identify such people. You either go to a history museum or a science museum or a planetarium or a golf course, or wherever you think these people who know the information that you're seeking is available, and you reach out to them. Right? You will not go to a mall, or you will not simply go step out to the street and try to find respondents. So judgment sampling. Then snowball sampling. Snowball sampling is wherein you get details about your subsequent respondents from your previous respondents. You go to the first guy, get his response, then ask him where I could possibly find another guy who will be able to answer these questions. That is snowball. One fellow will lead you to the second, second will lead you to 3 more, 3 more will lead you to 7 more, 7 more to 28 more. Snowball sampling. Right? Like as the snowball begins to roll down, it will gain in mass, momentum, volume. And then the fourth kind of non-probability sampling is quota sampling. In quota sampling, basically there will be some sort of characteristic of the population. You will make a conscious effort to retain that in your sample also. Typically gender or education level, or whatever else clearly defines a population. So that diversity or that characteristic should also be retained in your sample, ensuring that that whatever 40-60% or 30-70, whatever percentage is that, make sure that that is also more or less retained in your sample. Any doubts? Clear? Okay, so we will now move on to probability samples. Okay, should I let me ask you, shall I go on for another 30 minutes or should I resume in the next class?
Sir, I have a class at 2 o'clock.
Okay, fine. So we'll close it here then. Let's resume. Okay, so I think some of you, I'll just quickly answer some of questions. See, guys, I hope you're aware it's a 3-week course. It will conclude next week. Okay, by Friday next week, I have to give grades and allocate all the whatever points and all to you guys. Right. So some of you have written to me personally asking me if there can be an extension of your submission dates for your questionnaire. So I don't mind giving you 1 or 2 days, but the problem is then you will actually end up punishing yourself. After that, you have to sort of, do this survey also, get responses from some of your classmates, some convenient sampling you should do, right? Some 30-50 responses you should get. And after that, based on that, you should come out with a report. So if your questionnaire is not ready by tomorrow, day after, then again, things will get delayed. Already, I think Nirbhay has already given me the questionnaire. I've okayed it also. So start working on it. So don't delay it, because even if you take 2-3 days extra, then everything else gets pushed. So I would rather that you finalize the questionnaire today. You can WhatsApp me or whatever, get an okay from me, and then go ahead, get some responses, and then you start analyzing that, put it together, put it in a report, submit it. So 20 marks for questionnaire, 20 marks for undertaking this study, as in to getting the responses, and 20 marks for what is put in the report. Right. So therefore, I don't want you to lose out. I don't mind you submitting, instead of submitting it Friday, you can submit on Monday. But then if you submit on Monday, will you have time to get 50-60 responses from your classmates and then further look at the data, analyze it, and give me a report by end of the week? By Friday, we will close. And your grades will be given to you by, I suppose, Saturday. I don't know if I may be asked to submit the grades on Friday itself. Right.
Okay,
so there are, 10 other courses also running. So all of that has to be synchronized.
Today evening or I guess tomorrow.
So this is the reason I don't mind if you want to submit it tomorrow morning, I'm okay. But then in doing so, you punish yourself, you push yourself into a corner. And where is the time for you to get responses? So create web forms on Google Forms or SurveyMonkey or whatever, and just get going. So Monday, most likely you will have another quiz. Okay, and again, I think by end of the course, by maybe Thursday or Friday, I will give you another quiz for 20 marks. So 10 marks already, first quiz is over, second quiz for another 10 marks. Then 20 marks, another quiz after the whole topic is covered. So that will be 40 marks. And after that, 60 marks remain, 20 marks for questionnaire, 20 marks for the conducting the research, as in getting the respondents, and 20 marks for the report. That is how your 100 marks is spread. All right. So if there are any other questions, we'll close for today, resume on Monday. Okay, so you guys can actually do the convenient sampling. You can reach out to people who and whatever, you cannot do any of the things. So just get responses from your colleagues, university students, or whatever, friends and family, conduct that survey. All right. Any other questions, issues? Okay, all right. So we close then. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So.